Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer. And what did I just watch last night? I'll tell you what I watched. The 90-second Academy Awkwards. I refuse to call it the awards because awkward is the only word I can think of to describe the whole experience. Alright, there is one thing, one single solitary thing about the whole night that I thought was worth seeing. And that was joon-ho. Every time he won, and he had his bashful, very humble, self-deprecating, and surprised responses as he gave his speeches that needed to be translated, that was the most genuine thing that was on that stage all night. Everything else was phony. And awkward. That's the word I'm going to keep coming back to because it genuinely was so awkward. I'd compare it to a bad high school play, because that's exactly what it felt like. The presenters, most of whom are actors who get paid to do this for a living, and many of whom are really good, just felt like they were reciting their lines without actually wanting to be up there. And there were all these technical issues. The production value was so low. Like, past Oscar ceremonies have had this lavishness to them. They were events. They actually put time and effort into crafting a full stage show that felt big. It felt epic. It felt like it really was important. Even if it mattered about as much back then as it does now, it still felt like more pomp and circumstance went into the whole thing. It almost felt like the ceremony wanted to be over as badly as I wanted it to be over. They were doing their best to just not waste any time, and yet somehow they still ran a half hour long. And it's like the actors and all the presenters, they came on stage, they awkwardly delivered their lines as quickly as possible, they showed the nominees, they opened the envelope, get out of there. Like nobody wanted to be there. It was just painful. Absolutely painful. And not funny either. Like, there were attempts at humor. Actually, no, there weren't. I mean, when James Gordon and Rebel Wilson came out on stage dressed in those horrifying cat costumes that still looked better than the actual movie cats that they were in, I mean, it seemed like they were going to make a joke, but they came out there, they were in those costumes, and they were acting very serious, and then they said, collectively, being in the movie Cats, we know the importance of good special effects. I'm not leaving out the punchline, that was it. They said that in those ridiculous costumes, and it was met with laughter. I can't exactly say for certain whether or not it was genuine or canned laughter, but that apparently was the joke. So if you somehow hadn't seen Cats, you would have no idea what that was all about. And then, of course, after they presented all the nominees, and they just started randomly batting at the microphone, as Cats would do, that wasn't funny. That was awkward. And that was just one example. Everything else, that I'll admit that had the most effort put into it because of those costumes, but every other time comedians came on stage that night and started delivering jokes, they were so predictable. Of course they're not gonna know what a cinematographer is after they've just said how much they know about cinematography. Of course they're gonna try and play off the fact that they don't have a host this year because of Twitter. They're trying to make light of it, to make you think it doesn't actually matter. And they're presenting the idea that they are still self-deprecating, even though they're clearly not. It was painful. Again, only time I laughed the whole night was when joon-ho said, "I will be drinking a lot at the party." That was the only laugh I ever got, and it wasn't scripted. Everything else just... yikes. And speaking of yikes, there's one thing that's going to be very difficult to talk about. I was watching it with other people, and they knew I was going to do this video, and they said, maybe you shouldn't address the controversial, divisive socio-political topics. About 15 minutes in, I turned back to that person and said, how am I not going to address it? Because that's all they're talking about. Everyone who's getting up on that stage, whether they're presenting or winning, it feels like they're always bringing up something of that topic. How am I gonna avoid it? I don't think there is a way to avoid it. You know what? Hear me out to the end of this. The Oscars were just virtue signaling last night, and I'm not just using that term as a throwaway deflection. I genuinely do believe it was virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is what happens when you very publicly proclaim that you are in support of a particular cause and are therefore a good person for doing so, but you have nothing to back it up. You have nothing to show for it. You've put no effort into actually supporting that cause, or any support you have shown for it has been entirely lip service, and ultimately it just rings hollow and has no meaning at all. Case in point, when Taika Waititi came out to verbally announce all of those other awards that in the past ceremonies have at least gotten a truncated montage, but that's how low the budget was this year. They didn't even bother showing us that. But anyway, he came out to announce that, and beforehand, he made a point of saying, on behalf of the Academy, they acknowledge that the theater this ceremony is being held in is built on ground that was considered sacred by at least 3 Native American tribes. And of course, that was met with raucous applause, but to what end? Like, I understand that the rights of Indigenous people is something that's important to Taika Waititi as an Indigenous person himself, Indigenous from the Oceania part of the world. But what was the point of acknowledging that? I mean, it's not like the Academy is going to find a new location to hold the ceremony, tear down the theater, and give that land back to those tribes. No. They just want everyone to know that they realize where this theater is built. And they feel bad about that. Not bad enough to actually do anything about it, but just bad enough to make sure you know that they feel bad about it and that they are sorry and they will never do it again, and that's what really matters. They are virtuous and they have signaled it to the entire world. See what I mean now? Let me put it in a metaphorical context for you. Man, that is a nice TV. How'd you pay for it, man? Oh, I didn't. I stole it from my neighbor's house years ago. What? Well, why did you do that? I just did it, and you know, I feel really bad about it. Well, are you gonna give it back to him if you feel bad about it? No, I just feel bad about it, and I'll never do it again, and that's what really matters, don't you think? But where are you going? We were gonna watch the game. I'm not gonna steal your TV. Is it nicer than this one? Like I said, I'm sure Taika Waititi thought he was doing a good thing by saying this. But ultimately, since he was saying it on behalf of the Academy, who doesn't intend to do anything else, he just became a mouthpiece for a big organization that wants to have a good public image, but doesn't want to put in the effort to actually earn and maintain it. That, Taika Waititi, is why your Oscar felt lighter than you thought it would be. Because really, that Oscar is hollow. And of course that also extends to how they once again acknowledge through all of the scripted jokes that most of the nominees are white and male, except for all the ones in the other categories where there are actually quite a few women and non-white people, but you know, those don't count. Best actor, best director, those are the important awards. The other ones, I mean, who the heck watches documentaries, right? Yes, again, virtue signaling. They're drawing attention to it, they're acknowledging that they don't think it's right, still went ahead and did what they always do anyway. So why even bother? Now look, I'm someone who believes that the quality of a piece of art should be measured by its own standards and not by the standards of who made it. It doesn't matter if the movie was made by someone who was white, black, male, female, or a Martian. What matters is that the film itself is good, that it has all of the qualities needed to be a good piece of cinematic art. But if diversity is really that important to the Academy, then they should have actually made the nominee pool more diverse, instead of just acknowledging that they could have made it more diverse, but they didn't. And by specifically saying that things like Best Director doesn't have any women in it, well, there are only two ways you can interpret that. The first way is that you don't think any women who worked in the entertainment industry this year deserve to be acknowledged as Best Director for a feature film. Or you're saying that the people who did get nominated don't really deserve it because they're not women. Whichever one you go with, the Best Director award is devalued, as are the categories of Best Documentary, where women actually did win for directing. But, like I said earlier, apparently those don't count. But even if the Oscars did go out of their way to be as diverse as possible, that wouldn't have changed anything, really, because the problem isn't with the diversity or lack thereof, or the virtue signaling or lack thereof. The issue is with the ceremony itself, which was just, like I said, awkward and random at times. Like, halfway through, I was thinking, it's weird. We haven't gotten any pointless montages of clips from past films. And literally, as I was thinking that, in comes someone from Hamilton to introduce someone else from Hamilton to introduce a pointless montage of clips from past films. This one set to different songs that you immediately associate with movies. And that randomly led into a full performance of Eminem's Lose Yourself. Apropos of nothing. Why was that there? Lose Yourself, I realize that was part of the Oscar history, but that was years ago. That song came out when I was in high school. Why was it being played here? If there is a reason why it was being played, then that context was not at all provided. I mean, I guess the audience was really getting into it for some reason, but I wasn't. I was just confused. And then after the song was over, the scene just faded to black and went straight to commercial, as if they were thinking, yeah, I think the audience might need a little time to process what just happened. Lord knows I needed it. And then there was another horrible rap midway through that was recapping what had happened. That one's not even worth dwelling on, really. You know what? I'm just gonna call it. At the 91st Academy Awards, the Oscars officially died. At the 92nd Academy Awards, the corpse was propped up and tied with strings and paraded in front of the public with the hopes that everyone would be fooled that it was still alive. But it's not. This is just like watching a reanimated corpse. And I would suggest ways that it could be fixed in the future, but Mary Shelley warned us about that long ago. Ultimately, I just don't see the point of coming back and doing this again next year. Sometimes it's funny to watch people unknowingly make idiots of themselves, and sometimes it's just sad. The 92nd Academy Awards have officially fallen into the sad category. And it's just not enjoyable to watch this anymore. There's nothing to come out of it. It's all just emptiness. And I think they know it too. The way in which this Academy Awards went over, that there was no production value, there were those sound issues with the static popping during the songs, and even more than that, like the audio was even cutting in and out at points during the presentations. And the awkwardness of everyone on that stage, and the fact that they didn't even bother playing anyone off. It's like they didn't even think it was worth doing anymore. Just let them talk for as long as they want. Who cares? Nobody's watching anyway. It honestly kind of felt like the Academy can see the handwriting on the wall. They know that this is not going to last much longer. I will be amazed personally if the Oscars make it to 100. Yeah, the Oscars are done. this is not worth doing anymore. There's no point to it. This is the last Oscars video I'm gonna do. Maybe that really is the reason they're building the museum, which they once again advertised by having Tom Hanks come out and say a bunch of stuff and then doing this really quick little hyper fast video that wasn't even worth dimming the lights for. It feels... Last year I said that it felt like that was the pyramid erected by Pharaoh to be an eternal monument for him to go and die in. I genuinely do think that maybe that's what it is for the Academy. I genuinely think that. It's like, they know they're not going to be around much longer, so they're getting this museum up so that future generations will go there and think that even though the Oscars aren't around anymore, they used to be there and they used to mean something. As long as they get to dictate how they are remembered, well... The fact is, I'll remember them for stuff like this, which is unfortunate. More and more people are coming around to the notion that the Oscars really don't matter, that really no award ceremony actually matters. If they genuinely did matter, then why do people always debate about what movie should have won the Oscar? It's clearly not that clear-cut. But... either way, this was the end for me, as far as the Academy Awards go. That's it. No more videos like this. Next year, there is no Oscar Sunday for me. And I mean it. I'm not putting up another poll. I'm not going to change my mind. There's no point in suffering through this anymore. And personally, I don't think anyone should have to suffer through it anymore. Not even the people who are out in Hollywood attending it. Well, at least I know that for certain now. You know, I could have been watching The Host. That was directed by joon-ho. It's good. He does deserve recognition. I won't take that away from him. But the rest of the ceremony was just not worth it. And that's too bad. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.